You want to fuck a fictional character. I can see it in those shifty, lustful little eyes of yours. Or if you're asexual, you want to do the ace equivalent, which is share a piece of garlic bread with them. You know it's true. Whore. This sentiment of wanting to boink binary babes is everywhere these days. It is so commonplace. And every single day when I have scrolled far enough on Reddit down r popular to realize I should probably get off the toilet and go back to work, I'm met with a curious post from one of the Zenless Zone Zero subreddits, which always give me a vivid reminder of the horniness of the world. Like this one. There's two subreddits because one is less okay with than the other one. The content of one of these posts is effectively always the same. It is a horny post one step away from straight up hentai swarmed by a flood of equally horny commenters. Get used to the censoring, by the way, because I can't show anything from this place as it is or else I will get banned again, YouTube. To some, this kind of behavior really isn't surprising because if you've been around almost any community involved with anime or games or basically anything in general, you know that this behavior is exceptionally common. But two facets of the Zenless Zone Zero community make this worth highlighting here specifically. The first is just how prevalent gooning is to the very core of the community. Most of the time, stuff like this is segmented to its own specific subspaces for discussion, but these horny pictures and comments are effectively 99% of the conversation around the game, to the point that people made an entirely different subreddit to talk about the game part of the game and not discuss their barely disguised fetish. I'm serious, by the way. This video started out with me making a spreadsheet trying to figure out what percentage of horny posts there were, and I realized very fast this video was kind of be a dud because it was basically all of them. Which brings me to point number 2, which is that we are fully beyond simple horny posting and have achieved what I call a singularity. Spaces like the Zenless Zone Zero subreddit are an unimaginably dense mass of very open expressions of both deeply fetishistic behavior like incest posting, media hinting at a certain file format, and mass breeding anime girls, to less openly feral exclamations of wanting to make wives and daughters and mothers of characters. Or all three at the same time. And some of these commenters' Reddit flares, bro, like, pause the video if you want to read these, because I am not subjecting my dick holster to reading any of them aloud. Do not even get me started on the offshoot subreddits. But what if these guttural repulsions I feel to individuals being very public in their enthusiasm to marry and breed with hyper-idealized composites designed to exceed reality was, in fact, me being a bit of a judgy Judy? Could it be an overreaction? Could I be being close-minded? I mean, I like to think myself a rather informed and progressive individual, you know. I find transhumanism quite compelling and important to understanding our present and future trajectory as society. I am pro-kink and understand that fetish culture has been and continues to be an important cultural staple. I'm aware that desire is never purely natural, but always mediated by cultural, technological, and economic structures. So what if these guys are ahead of the curve? I mean, 20 years ago, eating ass was taboo, and now it's so mainstream it's become boring. And what if this is next? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, would that really be so bad? Part 1, hyper-reality and the... I'm not saying that out loud. Hey, you want to see a magic trick? Subscribe. Okay, look. To properly begin framing this enlightening web of meaning that you are lucky to get to witness, I need to unintentionally come to bat for these colorful individuals. Within a moderate part of the less terminally online population, there is a belief that people who constantly opine over digital constructs representing back problems and a desire to meet Chris Hansen think that the people are gross incels who think that forms like these should be the standard for which real life is met. i.e. real women need to look like this, that they would actually try to go meet Chris Hansen, etc., etc. But this, in my opinion, is broadly not the case. Some people absolutely do want these things. That is 100% undisputably true. But I believe the vast majority do not, because they understand that this reality literally cannot entertain these outlandish preferences because there is no tangible equivalent. Like being happily married to someone who loves you. Enter the concept of the daughter wife. Roll Tide. About 45 years ago, some French guy named John Baudrillard noticed a growing phenomenon in which the distinction between reality and its representation breaks down, and simulations of reality made from those representations become more real, or at least more influential than reality itself. He calls this phenomenon hyper-reality. And the concept of the simulacrum will help us understand the origin and nature of the daughter wife much better. Hate saying that. See, in our specific framework of gacha culture, for example, human desire attaches not to real people, but to images and archetypes that have no clear origin outside of the media ecosystem itself that they're from. A simulacrum is an image or representation that no longer reflects a real-world object, but instead refers only to other signs in a closed system. And gacha games, alongside a lot of anime characters in general, exemplify this condition because they are not copies or emulations of real women, but composites of self-referential tropes. The tsundere, the idol, the oni girl, or, more problematically, the daughter wife. A tsundere doesn't reference a real shy or aggressive person. It references the trope of the tsundere that exists in anime culture, just as the daughter wife, who embodies the contradictory roles of child and spouse, gross, does not exist in reality. They exist only as a simulacrum, a circulating cultural code confined within these great godforsaken gooning grounds. Bars. Yet, the player/father/husband's, hate that, relationship to this construct is explicitly and unfortunately not a passive one. Through simulation, gacha games and the environments that form around them construct interactive systems that produce a version of lived desire and experience of intimacy with the daughter wife, or any other form of simulacrum that is present in this thick-thighed Freudian cyborgian hellscape. The simulation does not represent a real instance of family or marriage or intimacy, but creates a parallel world in which such a relationship feels natural and rewarding. So in this sense, the player who claims authentic attachment is not simply pretending, because the simulation generates a new effective reality that is consumed as authentic. And this is hyper-reality. The moment when the simulated relation becomes more compelling than the real, when the impossibility of the daughter wife or breedable cat girl in real life ceases to matter because the reality of the game's construction and surrounding social boundaries make them present, desirable, and monetizable. More on that later. Now, any legitimate feeling of futuristic hyperreal intimacy people might feel towards these characters is not something I want to entirely dismiss, but I can't not emphasize that these characters are designed by committee to be the most fuckable, suckable, desirable shit you've ever seen, which the marketing definitely puts at the forefront, shall we say. These people, heavy use of quotation marks, are not modeled on ordinary human bodies, but constructed as hyper-idealized composites designed to exceed reality. Shout out Stellar Blade Cope. Slender proportions, exaggerated curves, stylized costumes, and open foot fetishes produce figures whose allure arises not from plausibility, but from their very detachment from the real. In this sense, the perfection of their design illustrates French guy's claim that the simulation becomes more real than the real, generating an autonomous field of attraction divorced from live human bodies. 3D women, gross. At least until Elon actually invents catgirls or something, but I feel like he's gonna blow up the world before that happens. You know the whole male gaze thing, right? In the same essay, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema by Laura Mulvey, My bad. She spoke of the concept of fetishistic scopophilia, which can give us another layer of insight in this layer cake of intellectual exploration I am spending time on for a reason. See, Mulvey argued that in cinema, women are often turned into fetishized images whose beauty is elevated to provide satisfaction in and of themselves, independent of the narrative or the context of which they are in. See Megan Fox in Transformers, Pamela Anderson in Baywatch, basically every woman in Overwatch. And I believe the exact same logic can be applied here in Zenless Zone Zero, where characters function as meticulously designed fetishes to get your credit card information. I mean, affection. Their desirability, erotic or otherwise, depends not on resemblance to actual human partners, but on the fact that they are images designed for endless circulation, entirely removed from the initial context for which they were made. Desire becomes organized around the pleasure of looking itself, and not around any plausible encounter with reality or seamless integration with the source that they are from. It's the classic, she's from a game? Green text about Mercy from Overwatch. Playing Overwatch 2 with Mercy. Little brother, 15, walks in the room and stares at my screen. Wait, she's from a game? What causes this? The joke is porn, by the way. The joke is porn. This helps explain why players on Reddit so readily describe characters as wives or husbands and all the daughter wife shit, and hell, even some other fun things like speculating half seriously about breeding with non-human ethereals in the game despite actively acknowledging their sexual organs. These attachments and desires are not incoherent, you see, because they flow logically from the fact that what is desired is not the possibility of real intimacy, but the hyper-real fantasy image of intimacy. This is the part that a lot of people who are less studious than me miss, because the absurdity of breeding with digital beings does not undermine the desire, but it affirms it, highlighting that fantasy in the hyper-real is embraced as reality. It's the same deal with traits like animal ears, tails, glowing eyes, other fantastical features. These elements do not kill attraction. They intensify it. I'd fuck the curator in his sexy, empty head. Do not at me. Have I taken my meds today? The inhuman qualities here underscore the fact that these characters are not representations of real people, but perfected simulations whose appeal lies precisely in their impossibility. Baudrillard would absolutely read this as a triumph of the simulacrum, the sign of the ideal partner that refers to not human reality, but to the game's own aesthetic system. Closed loop. This aligns perfectly with another Japanese researcher by the name of Hiroki Izuma's theory of database consumption in otaku culture, where fans no longer consume narratives, but instead recombine character traits and visual signs as objects of desire. Zenless Zone Zero players do not engage with characters as entire persons, but with modularized sets of traits. Catgirl ears, combat maid aesthetic, breast milk production, which circulate in gacha banners and fan discussions as interchangeable markers of attraction. Thus, desire becomes a function of the sign system itself, in line with Baudrillard's claim that simulation is no longer concealing reality, but replacing it. I wonder if he knew that I'd be applying his work in this way, he'd think it's cool or awful. Probably both, honestly. ZZZ's characters are not failed attempts at realism, you see, but hyper-real images whose fetishistic appeal derives from their artificiality. What appears at first glance as mere delusion with playing callers' fictional avatars, their wives, and breedable is in fact the logical extension of a hyper-real system in which images are more desirable than reality itself. Boom, bitch, Capri Sun sponsor me. But despite the bajillion asterisks that come with developing an authentic attachment to a gacha character, the fact that we're even in a timeline that can entertain the thought of legitimate intimacy with something fictional is inherently compelling, in my opinion. Or I really did forget my meds today. I don't actually remember. and whatever. Feelings! Part 2, cyborg intimacy, fictosexuality, and I want to marry Karlach. I hope you enjoyed the most complex breakdown of attraction to gacha characters of all times, because now I can finally get to the good shit, i.e. loving your 2D wife is in fact not coping, and I would seriously consider marrying Karlach if I got the chance. Big women, big women, big women. In Donna Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto, she describes the cyborg as a hybrid organism and a machine that breaks down boundaries between natural and artificial, human and non-human, real and imagined. Sound familiar? Her work is explicitly about dismantling traditional binaries in favor of hybrid modes of existence, not just physically, but culturally and symbolically, through challenging the idea of a pure human essence, suggesting instead that identity and intimacy are always constructed, hybridized, and mediated by technology. In a cyborg world, which we absolutely live in, intimacy is always technologically mediated, and your phone and your gacha game are shaping your desire. And the distinction between real intimacy and partners and digital ones is becoming unstable and blurred, exactly like me. 1 subscribe equals 1 mental stability. It may seem crazy, but player attachment, no matter how slight or unserious, exemplify the rise of this uniquely cyborgian condition. The references to characters as wives or husbands, which I'm sure all of us are guilty of at some point, are made not in irony, but as expressions of commitment, even if that commitment is distorted through a billion degenerate and exploitative lenses. Quite frequently, you see threads inquiring as to why people play these games, and almost always the answer is a singular character or trait. Sometimes it is completely independent of the quality of the actual game state or the time, or the effectiveness of even that character within the current meta. The affective tie here is not secondary to reality. The game's interface itself becomes the space where intimacy is enacted. Like this Reddit thread of a guy saying he took 40 screenshots going on a date with his wife in the video game. This is the exact same shit as people taking selfies on a little date, and you can't convince me otherwise. Haraway's framework allows us to see these bonds and expressions not as pathology, but logical outcomes, living in a world where digital and human experiences are co-constituted. I would marry Karlach in a heartbeat, big woman. I don't think it's a coincidence that in this day and age there is emerging scholarship on fictosexuality and fictoromanticism, these sexuality and orientations of people being attracted exclusively to fictional characters. Otaku anthropologist Patrick Gilbraith has been running extensive documentation on this kind of culture for a while now, and how individuals who feel culture or sexual attraction towards fictional characters increasingly become more articulate in these attachments as legitimate identities. Far from being reduced to simple escapism or compensatory imagery, fictosexuality represents an orientation shaped by a media-saturated environment. To quote Gilbraith, where he interviewed a gentleman who married an anime character, in a personal interview in Akihabara, Honda explained his problem with approaching character love as somehow compensatory. People don't imagine a relationship with an anime character because they couldn't get a girlfriend, but rather they fell in love with the character in the first place. We have grown up in a media environment where it is possible to fall in love with manga and anime characters. Some people never stop falling in love with them. He has openly expressed not being interested in 3D women, including idols. I really like the clarification there. In this light, the Redditor who calls a character in ZZZ his wife and goes on movie dates with her is not necessarily joking or confused, but articulating a genuine relational form that becomes more intelligible once we accept Haraway's collapse of the real fictional boundary. If we go even further beyond that one Reddit thread about ethereal breeding despite them not having sexual organs, might seem absurd. But this scenario highlights the fact that intimacy in the cyborg world need not depend on biological realism. Haraway be saying that in the world of cyborg relations, we open the possibility of desire towards hybrids, machines, or entities that defy conventional categories of gender, sexuality, and even species. I mean, again, I'd fuck the curator. He's It's kind of hot. People can say what they will about waifu discourse, but it is actively tapping into a wider cultural practice of intimate investment in fiction. And with Baudrillard, we see that simulation is no longer a mask of reality, but reality itself. And with Haraway, the cyborg relation acknowledges this collapse and embraces hybridity as a constitutive of legitimately new forms of intimacy. I'm not crazy. Fictosexuality is the demonstration of lived consequences in this shift. When simulation becomes a part of reality, attachments to fictional partners emerge, not as aberrations, but as culturally coherent orientations. The intimacy on display in the ZZZ fandom, or where else you really want to pick, should not necessarily be dismissed as delusion or fantasy gone awry, because it is better understood as cyborg intimacy. Relationships where technology does not merely mediate, but again, actively constitutes the experience of desire and attachment. Players' declaration of marriages, the fantasies of reproduction, and their affection for non-human characters all reveal how intimacy itself is evolving in a world where the boundaries between human and non-human, real and fictional, have collapsed. Karlak, I love you. Okay, look. Cards on the table, all seriousness here. I really do believe theoretically intimacy with an entity of non-human synthetic origin could be possible. If we have actual AGI, if we make real autonomous constructs that think and develop themselves and even have what aesthetic form they wish to take, if they even want that at all, I'd say it's pretty reasonable to think that developing affection for a self-actualized entity of non-human origin is entirely plausible. I mean, this is very rudimentary compared to that extreme, but you know, people these days are body modding themselves to the point where they're reaching the uncanny valley of humanity, and these people find love and no stranger to attraction towards themselves, and seems like we're just a few steps past that, and bada boom, bada bing, Peter Pan, Stephen King, let's marry some code. But again, there is this questionable panging in the back of my head, this underbelly underpinning all of this, that, oh, it's just at the back of my skull this entire time, and oh God, it just sounds a little bit like Part 3, desire, capital, fetishism. Look at me. You knew something like this was coming. Look, I'm sorry, bro. I didn't want to do this. Okay, maybe that's a lie. I actually kind of did. And we are gonna talk about authenticity and emotion again. I pinky promise. But I gotta do the leftist video SS thing and bring up Marx. So if I don't, Hassan is gonna come beat my ass for not hitting the quota. Okay, I am preserving myself. Okay, I don't want to turn into another Charlie Kirk. Yikes. We got a lot of thick, tasty, juicy insight from French Guy and Haraway on how desire attaches to simulations and cyborg hybrids rationalize me wanting to fuck the curator. And I gotta bring it back around to Special K to help explain how these desires to breed underage cat girls are unfortunately mass-produced and monetized. We live in a society. In a small niche text no one has ever heard of called Capital by Marx, he described commodity fetishism as the process by which commodities appear to possess value in and of themselves, concealing the labor and social relations which created them. Does this sound familiar? This logic is equally applicable to the characters of Zenless Zone Zero. They seem to embody a beauty, a charm, a waifu-esque quality inherently. But the fact that these attributes are meticulously engineered by design teams, algorithms, and marketing departments to make you do the awooga face from old cartoons.
I want a diamond ring, I want some bracelets and everything. Daddy, you better get the best for me.
Gacha systems in particular are kind of the apex of this fetishism. As I said before, these characters are barely narrative figures. They're designed to be propagated outside of the medium that they were made for. Like, that's why these games' stories is always hot garbage. They are commodities distributed through a randomized lottery system that encourages repeated spending because each pull is framed as a dash dazzling moment of revelation, dramatized with elaborate animation and insane visual spectacle that really just kind of gives me a headache. You cannot, in good faith, separate the desire that players feel for a character from the financial mechanism in which that character is acquired. What is fetishized in this grand machination is not only the character image, but the very process of commodified attachment itself. Taking one look at fan discourse, and this becomes incredibly evident. Posts declaring spending it all when she hits the scene and adjacency to wife comments make explicit the entanglement of intimacy and monetization because companies know how to get certain types of people. Thus, emotional investment is deliberately engineered to align with economic investment. Yes, I did buy Signalis for big space lesbians. What's your fucking point? I got some backup on this point by good old Anne Allison in her book called Millennial Monsters, which mentions that Japanese toy and game companies specifically cultivate what she calls desiring production, where affect is systematically harnessed to generate profit. And Zenless Zone Zero demonstrates this exact same dynamic. Attachment to digital wives or husbands is not incidental to the gacha system, but its very condition of possibility. I'm not Italian, I just like doing this motion a lot. Very similar to how gold appears to be just some inherently valuable thing to the average pea-brain moron who likes shiny stuff, a ZZZ character follows the same principle in seeming to be autonomous bearers of love or beauty independent of the infrastructure that produced them, when in reality, this desirability is produced through cycles of design optimization, i.e. hypersexualized proportions, hybrid traits, etc., etc. Promotional campaigns emphasize whatever fetish that character is built off of, and scarcity mechanics compel the continual ongoing spending to drain your bank account. The wife figure thusly functions as a fetish, an object believed to contain value and affection, masking the exploitative relations of the series of production thingies that underpin it. Shout out to the gacha players who brainlessly hate SAG-AFTRA and the voice actors who just want to be treated like humans because they dare disrupt the cadence of my anime video game waifu acquisition. My brother in Christ. This shit is selective. Characters are designed to maximize market appeal on a global level. Slim figures, youthful features, sexualized costumes, and fantasy-coded traits that can circulate across fan economies far and wide. Judith Butler, who we have talked about previously, shameless plug, has shown how gender norms are constructed and reproduced through cultural forms, and gacha characters exemplify this process beautifully. The predominance of sexualized female designs and the massive imbalance of male to female characters in all of these games reflects and reinforces the heteronormative male desire. Even, gays and women and everybody else try to subvert these representations through alternative fan attachment, but let's be honest, we know who this shit is for. In this way, the big C, the big scary word that I don't want to say because I know it'll make people go ree in the comments, both shapes the horizon of desire and constrains it within predictable market logics. Your wife is from a focus group. I'm sorry. It is that reason why the nagging in my head is so prevalent, despite the transhumanist in me wanting to see how far humanity can run beyond the simple confines of 3D bipedal women. The intimacy that these players experience with these characters is not outside the scary word, but deeply structured by it. To say she is my wife is to say she is my purpose. It is a relationship produced through a transactional system that equates affection with spending, which, to be fair, isn't, completely confined to the digital realm. Gross. While some people might experience this as empowering or meaningful, the broader logic is still exploitative. Desire is manufactured, commodified, and monetized here. Fictosexual intimacy is not only a cultural shift, but also a symptom of techno-capitalism's capacity to mold the very forms of human intimacy available in contemporary life. I'm sorry, fellas, I really am. I'm not intentionally trying to take anything away from you. I'm just too gay to let you be happy about this without saying anything about Special K. Thusly, the Zenless Zone Zero fandom reveals our grand paradox. On one hand, players articulate genuine feelings of attachment. On the other hand, those attachments are inseparable from the systematic and material structures that generate and exploit them. What looks like intimacy with a digital partner is at the same time intimacy with capital itself, as desire becomes the terrain through which profit is extracted. Far from being free expressions of fantasy, these attachments are shaped at every single step by the economic imperatives of the gacha system. Please don't cry, but to play devil's advocate, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, as many point out. A good number of us try to live our lives in a way that remain wary of this fact, while also maintaining a level of freedom and enjoyment and autonomy in our lives that could honestly be easily snuffed out if we overthink everything. For example, I'm never not going to eat meat. I'm never not going to buy some of my nice, slightly expensive clothes. If you're vegan or whatever, great, super cool for you. If you want to only like thrift or buy the most ethically sourced affordable clothing, like good for you, man. But like, I'm gonna keep getting burgers and I'm gonna keep looking at Rick Owens, okay? This gives me joy. Don't take that away. Obviously, I have lines like a preference to get locally sourced organic proteins and not buy complete sweatshop garbage, but navigating within these confines is something that we need to keep in mind until we can destroy them. And acting in other ways is a means of slowly breaking them down and removing them from the broader exploitative systems. And what would that look like, I wonder? Part fucking whatever. Read Becky Chambers, you fucks. In one of the best science fiction books of the 21st century, A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, a small cruise ship that bores wormholes for travel purposes with an alien that has a virus to let it see through space and time. Seriously, read this motherfucking book. Two members of the crew are in a romantic relationship. One is Jenks, a human computer tech with dope piercings and a form of dwarfism, and the other is Lovey, the ship's AI companion. Lovelace is the full name of her program, but over time, as she did missions, made friends with the crew, and interacted with more people around the universe, she grew and evolved beyond her base stock AI to become Lovey. Something completely unique beyond her original scope and have a identity and personhood all her own. Physical form is given a pretty large amount of attention in this relationship because Lovey obviously doesn't have a body and Jenks has a form of dwarfism, something that is seen as aberrant in part of our fancy sci-fi future. He could get it fixed with, a bunch of fancy schmancy technology, which doctors frequently comment on, but his mother fostered in him a sense of confidence in who he is, whether or not he has the technology to do anything about making him normal. Jenks regularly expresses sentiments like Lovey doesn't need a body to be worthy of attachment, or the semantics of love between cells and circuits being no more than a technicality, because despite both of them seeming to be less desirable to the forms that they may have been birthed in, that doesn't detract from the wealth of life and experiences that they have had, which makes them them. Read this book, you fucks. Point being, whoever the fuck says we should let the current established cultural or material confines be a permanent prison lacks the imagination to pursue meaning independent of them. Capitalism bad doesn't make a burger less tasty or your clothes any less cool if you have the confidence in the whole of your being to feel authentic within your choices, actions, and personhood rather than feeling completely entrapped and controlled by the system. And as I've said, I don't see why we can't get there with intimacy. Right now, I will say we're a little too close to the whole brainwashing, gacha marketing, desire controlling, nightmare focus group hellscape world, but the acts that people engage in to find happiness and authenticity and joy in spite of the broader systems around us will increasingly become more and more radical as the collapse of fiction and reality becomes increasingly blurred. And at the very least, I think that's going to be incredibly interesting and open entirely new ways for people to express themselves and find happiness and joy. I've legitimately thought if I'd like body mod myself to have like a third arm or something. I feel like that would be just like really convenient, but I want it to be detachable. People have and always will rebel against broader systems that feel constrictive to find meaning and value excluding them. And we're gonna get there with, binary babes too. We really are in one of those born too early memes, except it's basically like born too late to experience pure naturalistic human intimacy, born too early to experience true cyborgian relationships, but born just in time to make video essays pondering the legitimacy of calling gacha characters your wife. Amazing. I do genuinely believe the Zenless Zone Zero demonstrates that we are on a path to fictosexual intimacy not being perceived as pathologic, but a coherent cultural response to the conditions of hyperreality, cyborg embodiment, and capitalist desire, all having a disgusting orgy. When players call characters their wives or speculate about breeding with ethereals, they are not escaping reality, but they are actively participating in the collapse of boundaries between reality and simulation, the human and the non-human, the commodity and intimacy. That last one is not great and problematic, and we've got to work on it, but other stuff, cool. The hyperreal, the visual fetishism, the cyborg ontology, the commodity fetishism all help us see how desire in these gooning grounds is neither arbitrary nor delusional, but profoundly structured by technoculture as we inhabit it. Simple dismissals of these attachments as degeneracy miss the radical implications, which I would like to apologize for, fellas. They reveal that intimacy is no longer confined to flesh and blood, but is increasingly mediated through simulations and through algorithms. And this does not mean such relationships are necessarily fake or less than, but rather that they represent new intimate possibilities in a world where the real and the virtual are so close to being one and the same. The player's fictosexual attachment is at once a system of capitalist commodification of desire and a subversive reworking of intimacy into forms that traditional categories cannot explain or contain. Both. In this light, Zenless Zone Zero is more than just another gacha title. It is a stage upon which the future of intimacy is being rehearsed. Its fandom illustrates how individuals negotiate desire with systems designed to monetize affect, yet how they also create meaning, identity, and attachment beyond the boundaries of what historically has been considered love. The question then, my dear viewer or subscriber, is not whether fictosexuality is real, but what its rise tells us about the shifting conditions of intimacy itself. As simulations become more immersive, AI companions become more responsive, the digital economies become more entangled with daily life, the line between virtual partner and human will only blur further. What new forms of intimacy will emerge in a world where digital is not a supplement to reality, but its very condition? And when those forms arrive, will we recognize them as love? Or will we be clinging to a category that no longer fits? I still think this is pretty fucked up though. Congratulations, you made it to the end. Thank you to the Patreons and the members that are scrolling past. I appreciate it. I feel like I'm back on my groove with this one. My brain hasn't been working pretty good and I've had some fun making videos, but this is the shit that I love talking about, and my brain was being dysfunctional for a hot minute, but I'm feeling okay. I feel like things are on the up and up. I got some cool, fun ideas for things. Speaking of which, book club is live as of the time of posting this video. I don't know the exact cadence yet, but there should be a full schedule for our reading of The Will to Change. Is that over here? No, it's not. But we're reading Will to Change in my book club on my Patreon. I'm going to be posting the first one for free so people can see if they like it. The first one is also free from the previous one that I did. If you want to check it out, there's going to be a format change, but who fucking cares? Comment what fictional character you'd marry if you weren't subjected to such hideous ridicules and absurd judgments from broader, less sophisticated peoples, not understanding the true love and intimacy you have for your binary babe. Man, the meds thing first started out as a bit, but like it's been like a couple hours now, and I'm kind of feeling like I haven't actually taken my meds, so I think I'm gonna do that now. Yeah, thank you for watching and giving me money irresponsibly, and yeah, be happy, be joyful. Stuff is bad, systems are bad, obviously, but like, have a little fun, you know. Don't have lines, break things out, you know. Don't torture yourself. We're all just vibing, you know. Like, get that tasty treat, get those cool pants, fucking show off some titty. It makes you happy. I don't fucking care, you know. Just like, I don't know, fucking happiness. Okay, I'm gonna go take my medicine. Thank you for watching. Good